yeah. What a cool groove. Someday, maybe today, I'll hunt down the original of that song. It runs about 5 minutes. It was written for me by this cool kid in Romania. But the total song is about 5 minutes, and it's awesome because it interleaves back on itself, and it reminds me of a writhing snake, you know, constantly moving and shifting. And anyway, that's how I see it. You may not see it that way. That's the beauty of music. We each interpret it our own way, right? Never ceases to amaze me. I can listen to a beautiful opera piece or a piece sung by someone, and it can bring tears to my eyes. And I can look at the guy or the girl sitting next to me, and they're stoic as a stone. Doesn't move them at all. That's like, wow. I can listen to a beautiful piece of music. You know, I grew up in a very musical family. I'm the black sheep. I don't play anything. But my family are all very, very highly talented musicians. And I remember going to, various recitals and things that all, grew up on classical and classical music. And I can remember going to these recitals, and I'd be sitting there. And, of course, if you weren't allowed to breathe loudly when I was a kid, not like these kids today. They sit there and they're playing with their phone and they're making noise and snorting and coughing and, farting and every other darn thing out in public, and they're talking amongst themselves, talking on a cell phone during the middle of a performance. I feel like reaching over and smacking them in the back of the head. When I was a kid, man, when you sat in a recital or a performance, you kept your mouth shut. You asked permission to hiccup. Anyway. All right, so let's get on to our second topic. This morning, it is the issue of the media shield law that Chuck Schumer has been out pushing. Now, I've talked about this to you before, and I'm very, very deeply concerned about it, because what it is a very, very thinly veiled effort to license and permit individuals to be journalists. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that the real goal here is to take the alternative media that's not able to be herded like the big six that own everything, and to take that group of non-compliant journalistic insurgents, right, and herd them in a way that you can control cats. So they want to license and permit you. And here's what you need to recognize. Anytime you look at licenses and permits, first of all, what they give you, they can take away, right? And so once government is in the business of licensing those few people who have free speech, we may as well have Joseph Goebbels running the media. We're already not far from that, so don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. I'm here to tell you that it's almost impossible, unless you're listening or reading alternative media solutions, to find truth in today's media. That is the truth, folks. There is almost no way that you can know what's going on in the country unless you are already listening or watching or reading alternative media. If you are not, I cannot strongly encourage you enough to begin to do so. Stop watching Fox News. I'm telling you right now, Fox News is nothing but controlled opposition. There's a lot of people that are going to not like when I say that, but it is true. You can disagree with me. You're entitled to your opinion. I'll fight to the death to let you have it. But it doesn't change the fact that Fox News is owned by News Corp, which also owns the Wall Street Journal. I mean, look, I'm not saying that they don't, break news stories and things like that. They do. They have to in order to be in business. But they're not really coming out and telling us the truth. The number 2 Republican in the Senate came out yesterday and said, here's the truth. Chuck Schumer's shield law is a bad idea and one whose time has not come. The simple truth is, he's recognizing this for what it is. It is a thinly veiled attempt to stop alternative media. Now, is Cornyn from Texas? He's Senator John Cornyn from Texas. Is he trying to, set the stage for his party? Of course. A lot of this is self-serving. No mistake about it. But there are times when you use the enemy's mistake, and I do classify them as the enemy, and you should too, when you use their mistake or their words against them. And in this case, he's made it very clear. He told Breitbart in an interview that was exclusive to them, he says, "Believe me, we will not be rolled over." Now, to be honest with you, that's probably the best news I've heard today. Because what that says to me is he's determined not to let this thing happen. And Schumer's been coming out saying, we've got all the votes we need. We have the 60 votes we need. We're good to go. And frankly, I'll tell you, if they pass this media shield law with the propaganda rules they changed about 5 or 6 months ago that I told you about and I exposed and no one else in the media has even talked about, we're done, folks. Because those people who are asleep at the switch will never be able to wake up. If somebody's silencing the alarm clock by putting their hand over the bell, that ticker thing, how is the person ever supposed to hear the alarm? And that's exactly what this media shield law will do. Chuck Schumer's, quote, Free Flow of Information Act. The Free Flow of Information Act. You're kidding me. He actually has the unmitigated gall to call it the Free Flow of Information Act. If you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it 1,000 times. Every bill that comes out, you can tell whether you should or shouldn't vote for it just by its name. If it sounds like this rosy thing that's good, vote no. Chuck Schumer's Free Flow of Information Act passed the Senate Judiciary Committee in September. And now he says he's got the 60 votes needed to pass it, right? We need a few more Republicans, he says. Not many more, but we have the 60 votes. Well, right off the bat, that tells me that that's not true. We will get a few more Republicans, he says, but not many more. But we have the 60 votes. All right. First of all, if he had the 60 votes, he wouldn't need any more Republicans, number one. Number two, Cornyn comes out and makes the real point. If he had the votes to pass it, it would already have been passed. Duh. Exactly. Cornyn throws that out and says, this isn't about passing legislation. This is about distracting the public's attention and changing the subject from the failed policies of this administration. I think you could put that in this and that same category. So, what you need to understand is this. I don't know whether they have the votes to pass this or not. I can tell you that if they do, then every American in the nation should do what? File to be a journalist. Every American. Anyone between the ages of 18 and 80 should submit an application to be a journalist. There you go. What's the goal of today? How can I be what's today's theme? How can I be a partisan and muck up the works? That's the game. And that's your new job. That's your new job description. You don't have any other job description going forward as a patriot and as an American citizen who truthfully wants this country to be preserved in some semblance of what our founders had created for us. And I'm not talking about saving and conserving what we have. That's what the conservatives want. I'm talking about going backward. I want to move back in time. I want to move back in time to a point where our Constitution was the guidebook, where everyone followed it. Now, has that been any time in our recent modern history? Heck no. We haven't had a constitutional government in well over 100 years. In fact, go back to where the 13th Amendment was the original 13th Amendment, not the bogus one that they made, which was the 14th Amendment, renamed the 13th. Go back to the 13th Amendment, the original one. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I want you to do, here's your homework assignment for today. Go look up the original 13th Amendment, and there are some places where you can find some information about it. And I should have been prepared for this, and I wasn't. The original 13th Amendment. I want you to go find it, and you can just type it in, the original 13th Amendment. The one that says that anyone who takes the name of a foreign, foreign government and utilizes that for their own as a title, they lose their citizenship as an American citizen. Did you know that? It passed. It was an amendment until I think around 1865. Tom Lacavara, who comes on after me, will on Patriot FB. He's got a whole discussion on this, and I'll have him on the program one day. Not next week, because next week I'm taking a vacation, but the week after that. Do your own homework, though. This 13th Amendment, the original 13th Amendment, was in the record books well into the 1860s, until 1870. Then it was removed and secretly removed. Here's the point. Here is the point. We haven't had a constitutional government in this country since before the Civil War. That's the truth. So frankly, the republic that we thought we had probably didn't last 75 years. Think about that for a minute. We've been operating under this de facto shadow government for so long, most of us don't even realize that we're living in the shadow. And we are no longer beneficiaries of the sunlight of the original Constitution. So when we talk about these people wanting to limit your access to information by licensing journalists who will be a, quote, covered journalist, that's insane. Now, they're saying, well, this is only for the purposes of being able to subpoena them and other legal requirements to expose confidential sources in leak investigations. Stop right there, because the next three words tell you everything you need to know. And other areas. Other areas. What are the other areas? It's called mission creep. Once this law is passed, it's the rule of incrementalism. Just like Obamacare, it's not intended to be Obamacare. It's not intended to be a voluntary thing. Shortly, it will be universal health care. You'll see. If you don't believe me, you just watch. If we don't implode economically before, or explode economically before then, shortly we will see Obamacare merged into universal health care. Government-sponsored, single payer. That was the goal all along, folks. Everything else you've been told is a stunning, staggering lie. Now, this goal is to get licensed or journalists licensed. And once they're licensed and permitted, anyone who's not will have no First Amendment rights. They've already said that it won't cover things like bloggers. Says, in fact, Cornyn says Schumer's proposal is flawed and may be an unworkable idea. Here's what Cornyn says. They want to pick and choose which journalists are covered. In other words, if you're a blogger, they may not cover you. But if you work for the New York Times, they might. Given the changes in the way we get information and the way we consume news, that really smacks to me in essence of government licensing who's an official journalist for the purposes of a shield law and who's not. If there is one thing I can glean from the First Amendment, it is that government should not be in the business of licensing the news media. See, you cannot have a free press if you're licensed by the government, because you're no longer free. They've now got their hooks and the ring into your nose. And like a bull, you can be led around easily. He goes on to say, it's totally inconsistent with the notion of a free press and the First Amendment. For example, if you've witnessed a crime taking place, you or I would both have to respond to a grand jury subpoena and come to testify what we've seen. This idea of saying you could have information about a crime and you are immunized from having to partake in a basic act of American citizenship strikes me as pretty odd, to say the least. Here's the problem. At this stage in the game, the real goal here is to censor those people that are not in line and are not malleable because they've got something to lose. When I say that, I mean it this way. The people who are, for all intents and purposes, the media who make their living at this and have an enormous amount to lose by being removed from the media, they are easily corrupted, because you can simply say to them, you know what? If we take your media license away, you're never going to work again in this business. How about the threat that we used to, the old threat we've heard from Hollywood, right? You'll never work in this town again. How many times have we seen that in a movie, right? Isn't that the same thing? Now you've got the government saying, I'll make sure you never work again because you've crossed me, because you exposed a whistleblower. You allowed a whistleblower to speak out. I got to tell you, anytime you have a government that has shown us what their approach is going to be to whistleblowers, like the Obama administration, the last thing you want to do, the very last thing you want to do, is put it in the hands of the mainstream Ministry of Propaganda to be responsible to help those whistleblowers get the word out. Here's an example for you. Edward Snowden came out and said, I'm going to have to expose this to the public. And everybody who didn't like him or didn't like what he did said, why didn't he go to Congress? I'll tell you why he didn't go to Congress, and you already know the answer. Congress would have buried it. It would have never made it to you. Your ears would have never heard it. They would have silenced him, and in all likelihood, he would have died in a diving accident, or he would have died in a car crash, or he would have, slipped off of a cliff on an ice cream cone or something. Come on, folks. You can't actually believe that they wouldn't have gone to those lengths to avoid what Snowden has created. Please. So here's the deal. Should the next Snowden also be barred from, well, first of all, we know that the next Snowden can't go to Congress because he'll get the same treatment Snowden would have gotten had he gone to Congress. So if you also bar him from going to the media, where is a whistleblower to go? How are they to get the word out? On a YouTube video that can be censored by Google? Please. Let me throw something out here at you. Glenn Greenwald is alternative media. He's not mainstream. The Guardian newspaper, while it is a legitimate newspaper, is, hardly the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal of England. The Guardian newspaper is, it's a little bit more than your daily small-town rag, but it's not a whole lot bigger. The Guardian newspaper is not some mainstream, massive newspaper like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Miami Herald, the LA Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer. It wasn't the size of the Philly Inquirer. I'm not saying that they're alternative media, but, not a far cry from it. Let's put it that way. And they've done very well with it. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. To a certain extent, they're doing this from a profit perspective. But at the same point in time, if there's no place to go, if you can't go to a Breitbart, if you can't go to a, I hate to throw him into the mix, but a Glenn Beck, and I don't know whether he'd do it or not, but there are a ton of alternative media solutions out there. And if you can't go to them, the Washington Times, good example. If you can't go to these alternative media sources, then who are you going to go to? If you can't go to Congress, because they're already corrupt and they're just waiting for you. This is like a spy novel, right? Where you hear the spy call his headquarters and they say, listen, just come on in, John, from the cold and we'll take care of you. And he's like, yeah, right. I know you'll take care of me, but not exactly how I want to be taken care of. It's the same deal. The Senate and the Congress would be over there saying to Edward Snowden, listen, Ed, come on in. Just come in from the cold and let us get you through this. Yeah. Right. So if you can't go to Congress and you can't go to the media because they're licensed And they're required under their licensing agreement to go back and tell the government, hey, a whistleblower came over here and called me today, and his name is Bob Smith, and his phone number is 555-1212. Who are you going to go to? How are we to ever know? It's already bad enough that in the Federal Register a couple of months ago, I exposed to you how the United States of America, your government, removed the prohibitions on the use of propaganda against American citizens through the news media. Yeah, you didn't know that, did you? Well, you can go back. I mean, I did a whole radio episode on it, and it made WorldNet Daily, and they made a whole article and a story out of it, plus put the entire video right in the middle of the story. The United States of America has lifted the prohibitions by the Smith-Mundt Act, which prohibited the federal government from utilizing propaganda against American citizens. This is the same propaganda we pump into communist countries. Now, it can be modified and retuned for what? Our consumption. So what are we getting? Everything you see today is propaganda. Nothing that you hear out of the major six is not. Nothing. You don't even know that you're being lied to anymore because the stories are now interleaved, right? And you can't tell the difference between whether it's a legitimate news story or a government-sponsored news story. What we have now is a group of newspapers that, for all intents and purposes, must be, the equivalent of TASS or Pravda. No difference, folks. So who's a whistleblower to go to? You wouldn't see a famous Russian like Solzhenitsyn running to Pravda in its heyday or running to TASS and saying, hey, I want you to blow the whistle on this government corruption story. He'd find himself right back in the gulag. How do you think this is going to be any different? The truth is, the left, especially the left, the right also fears talk radio. They don't like the fact that I can sit out here and I can educate you. They don't like the fact that I can sit out here and I can expose them. That's the truth, folks. And they would love nothing more than to shut this down. Not just me. Talk radio as a general rule. Even the Republicans. I mean, they use it when it's to their advantage. Of course they use it as a weapon. But it's a weapon they handle gingerly because it can bite them. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to tackle our third topic this morning. And that will be real inflation and real unemployment. Exactly how staggering are they? And boy, oh boy, are they staggering. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can email me direct about this or any other episode that we do or segment that we do. And you can email me at mike@americasvoicenow.org.